now. Hi folks, we're just giving everyone a chance to get logged in here real quick before we get started. If you are already in the event, I'm copying in chat some information about how you can buy Luster through greenlightbookstore.com. So check that out while we wait just a few more seconds. All right, good evening and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Chelsea from Greenlight and we're excited to host tonight's event with Raven Leilani, launching her new book, Luster. She'll be talking with Samantha Irby, so you're in for an excellent time. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks to Raven and the team at FSG for making this happen, and to all of you for showing up. Though we're not able to host events in our store spaces, our community of authors and readers is still here. We're grateful for your support and for the chance to make this space for conversation and connection. Now I just have a couple of housekeeping things. First thing to know is that in our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear the speakers, but they cannot see or hear you. They can see that you're here though, and you can see a count of your fellow attendees on the top of your Zoom screen. The exact location of that participant count depends on what kind of device you're using. You're welcome to post your comments and thoughts in the chat. That's a great way to show your appreciation for the author and interact with fellow attendees. If you want to open up that window, you can scroll across the bottom of your Zoom window and you'll see an icon labeled chat. You'll also see an icon down at the bottom of your Zoom window labeled Q&A. If you have a specific question you'd like to have answered by the author, please post that question in the Q&A module. We'll be pulling questions only from the Q&A to be answered in the later part of the program. And if you see someone else's question that you would really like to hear answered, you can go ahead and upvote that. And the questions with the most likes will float towards the top of the window for our moderator as we're pulling those questions to ask Raven. We are recording tonight's event, so look for video or audio versions on our social media channels later on. And importantly, tonight's featured book, Luster, is available for sale from greenlightbookstore.com for shipping or curbside pickup. If you care about supporting the careers of authors and the ongoing existence of independent bookstores, buying tonight's featured book is a great way to show your support. Our interviewer for this evening is Samantha Irby. She's the author of the acclaimed essay collections, Needy, the New York Times bestseller, We Are Never Meeting in Real Life, and the #1 New York Times bestseller, Wow, No Thank You. Based in Kalamazoo, Michigan, she writes the blog, Bitches Gotta Eat, and the newsletter, Who's on Judge Mathis Today. She'll be speaking with our featured author, Raven Leilani. Her work has been published in Granta, the Yale Review, McSweeney's Quarterly Concern, Conjunctions, The Cut, and New England Review, among other publications. She received her MFA from NYU and was an Axon Foundation writer-in-residence. Her debut novel, Luster, is an utterly absorbing portrait of a young Black woman trying to make sense of her life, her hunger, her anger, in a tumultuous era, as well as a haunting, aching description of how hard it is to believe in your own talent and the unexpected influences that bring us into ourselves along the way. In addition to being a favorite among Greenlight staff, the book has garnered praise from a number of highly acclaimed authors: Carmen Maria Machado, Zadie Smith, Garth Greenrail, Caitlin Greenidge, and Britt Bennett, who calls Luster a darkly funny, hilarious, moving debut from a stunning new voice. Raven is going to start us off with a reading from the book, and then she'll be talking with Samantha and with all of you. Raven, please take it away.
I just wanted to say first, thank you everyone. I can see like the numbers kind of scrolling up. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, Sam, for doing this. I'm just going to start with the first chapter, which requires less explanation. I'm just going to jump right in and read just for a little bit. The first time we have sex, we are both fully clothed, at our desk during working hours, bathed in blue computer light. He is uptown processing a new bundle of microfiche, and I am downtown handling corrections for a new Labrador detective manuscript. He tells me what he ate for lunch and tells me if I can manage to take off my underwear in my cubicle without anyone noticing. His messages come with impeccable punctuation. He is fond of words like taste and spread. The empty text field is full of possibilities. Of course, I worry about IT remoting into my computer or my internet history warranting yet another disciplinary meeting with HR. But the risk, the thrill of a third pair of unseen eyes, the idea that someone in the office with that sweet post-lunch break optimism might come across this thread and see how tenderly Eric and I have built this private world. In his first message, he points out a few typos in my online profile and tells me he has an open marriage. His profile pictures are candid and loose. A grainy photo of him asleep in the sand, a photo of him shaven, taken from behind. It is this last photo that moves me. The dirty tile and the soft recession of steam, his face in the mirror, stirring with quiet scrutiny. I save the photo to my phone so I can look at it on the train. Women look over my shoulder and smile, and I let them believe he is mine. Otherwise, I have not had much success with men. This is not a statement of self-pity. This is just a statement of the facts. Here's a fact. I have great breasts, which have warped my spine. More facts. My salary is very low. I have trouble making friends, and men lose interest in me when I talk. It always goes well initially, but then I talk too explicitly about my ovarian torsion or my rent. Eric is different. 2 weeks into our correspondence, he tells me about the cancer that ravaged half his maternal family. He tells me about the aunt he loved who made potions with fox hair and hemp, how she was buried with a corn husk doll she made of herself. Still, he describes his childhood home lovingly. The digressions of farmland between Milwaukee and Appleton, the yellow-breasted chats and tundra swans that would appear in his yard looking for seed. When I talk about my childhood, I only talk about the happy parts. The tape of Spice World I received for my 5th birthday, the Barbie I melted in the microwave when no one was home. Of course, the context of my childhood, the boy bands, the Lunchables, the impeachment of Bill Clinton, only emphasizes our generational gap. Eric is sensitive about his age and about mine, and he makes a considerable effort to manage the 23-year discrepancy. He follows me on Instagram and leaves lengthy comments on my posts, retired internet slang interspersed with earnest remarks about how the light falls on my face. Compared to the inscrutable advances of younger men, it is a relief. We talk for a month before our schedules align. We try to meet earlier, but things always come up. This is just one way his life is different from mine. There are people who count on him, and sometimes they need him urgently. Between his abrupt cancellations, I realize that I need him too, in a way that makes my dreams delirious expressions of thirst, long stretches of yellow desert, cathedrals hemmed in dripping moss. By the time we set out for our first real date, I would have done anything. He wanted to go to Six Flags. We decide to go on a Tuesday. When he rolls up in his white Volvo, I've only made it to the part of my pre-date routine where I try to find the most appropriate laugh. I put on 3 dresses before I find the right one. I tie up my braids and line my eyes. There are dishes in the sink and a pervasive salmon smell in the apartment, and I don't want him to think it has anything to do with me. I put on a complex pair of underwear that is not so much underwear as a bundle of string, and I stand before the mirror. I think to myself, you're a desirable woman. You are not a dozen gerbils in a skin casing. Outside, he is double parked. He leans against the car and remains like this as I come out, his eyes bright and still. His hair is darker than I expected, a black so opaque it looks blue. His face is almost obscenely symmetrical. The one of his eyebrows is higher than the other, and it makes his smile seem a little smug. It is the 2nd day of summer, and all the city's powers have no sway over him. I reach for his hand, trying not to swallow my tongue, and something feels strange. Of course there are nerves. In person, he is a total daddy, his face alert and hard, softened only by the slight recession of hair. But this strange feeling has nothing to do with that, nothing to do with me looking past his sensuous mouth and slightly askew nose for any indication that he is as nervous as I am. It is that it is 8:15 a.m. and I feel happy. I am not on the L, smelling someone's lukewarm pickles, wishing I were dead. So I'll stop there.
That was incredible.
Thank you.
The description, like the pre-date getting ready description, among all, like you have so many incredible description, like your way of describing things is so incredible. But the bundle of string and the gerbils in a skin casing, I knew like from that moment, I was like, oh, I'm really gonna love this book. And also, I will admit that my one regret in pre-marriage life is that I did not bang enough like hot old men. Like I was a fucking grizzled old man. That was really speaking to me too. Okay, but I did write real questions. I wasn't gonna like, I could spend the whole time being like, let's talk about like juggling some droopy balls. But I'm gonna pretend to be a real interviewer. Okay, so the first thing, which I have some experience with, I wanted to talk to you about what it feels like for you to be putting out a book in these like weird, precarious times. Like I had a lot of like, does this matter? You know?
Yeah, no, I feel that. Like I feel it very much. Like there's an element of publishing during this moment which is highly pressurized. I feel like, you know, even before the pandemic happened and like the number of reckonings that came after that happened, publishing books, we were thinking about how do you publish a book during what is most likely going to be an insane election year, you know, and then then everything else happened. And so there is definitely an element of how can I talk about my book right now, you know, but I felt really warmed by the fact that people are kind of rallying around books and really caring about them. And it you know, this is my first time around, so I kind of have nothing to measure it up against. It's weird that this is for a lot of us, who are debuting the first time kind of out of the gate, but I feel a real I feel a real warmth. I feel really heartened by how people have kind of rallied around books, and we've made it work as we're doing here.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that really made me feel better was I was like, well, you know, most people can't read, but the ones that can are reading during this time off that we have, and they've been really excited to have new things to read. And so that made me feel better. I was like, well, at the very least, I can provide a distraction, and like at least my book isn't about like, you know, pestilence or you know, horrible.
And that's like my main relationship, I think, to books and to painting, to anything I really love, is it's like it's a form of escape. And I think like a lot of us really needed that.
Yeah, we do. How are you feeling about like a virtual tour? Were you looking forward to like getting out and hugging the sweaty masses?
Yeah, you know, kind of. It's kind of a little bit of both. Like I have to lay my cards on the table. Like I'm very overwhelmed in big kind of teeming public spaces. But I miss like going to a reading and it's like damp and humid, and you know, like you're kind of all huddled together and you can feel the caring in the room. And like how I feel about it is, you know, there was a while back I went to a Tame Impala concert. It was like 2015, 2014, and the first time I saw them, and they were still small enough, like where they were playing kind of smaller venues, and I was close enough to see like the frontman's bare feet, you know, and like that's maybe a creepy thing to say, but like that element of like being in person is something I miss, is that closeness. But at the same time, you know, this kind of feels right for our age, you know.
I mean, it's pretty nice to like walk into like a room, sit down, talk at people who you can't who can't make you nervous, and then get up and leave. I do
Right.
want you to have the experience of like people like pressed up against you as you speak your words to them, like that awkwardness where you sweat through your clothes. But I think maybe like for the first time around, this is a good like easing into.
Yeah, it's a little kind of like slight training wheels. So I will say I'm like still sweating through my clothes. So I'm getting that experience.
Me too, but that position is not breathable. Like, don't make this mistake. Okay, I want to know about, and you can make of this whatever you want, like your path to publishing, and did you always want to write, or
Sure.
like how did you end up doing this book and getting it out?
So, I mean, it's like, I'll try it. The short story is that, I knew early on that writing was something that I really loved, and that was a thing where I could escape into. Like the very first kind of writing I did was like secret writing. I was like a Seventh-day Adventist kid, and we were observing the Sabbath.
Okay,
And
can I tell you something insane? I don't mean to interrupt you, but my wife is from Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is like where the Seventh-day Adventist University is.
Oh, wow.
Surrounded by Seventh-day Adventists. And I have nothing profound to say. I just wanted you to know that.
No, that's actually really, it's kind of rare that I run into anyone who like even kind of knows the fundamental tenets of what that is. That was mostly my high school experience, was like explaining this is why I can't dance, and so for me, one of the first ways I broke the Sabbath was writing, like that, and I kind of just needed something. I needed that stimulation, and so I knew early on that I really loved it, and I tried out a bunch of different things. I started with poetry because that was the first like kind of written form I fell in love with. But when I really started getting serious, I feel like I did what I think most of us do, where I went through those traditional routes first. Like literary journals were the first, places that gave me a break and like made me feel like I could keep going and that I was doing something right.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got to the MFA, I was ready to write the book, and I just kind of knew it felt really urgent. It felt like all the time was borrowed. So I kind of was just like, I have to get this out.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. As a person who did zero school after high school and like wrote a blog in the bathroom, I'm always fascinated by people who feel like passionate about writing. People always ask me like if I'm passionate about it, and I'm like, I write about like going to the toilet. I don't know.
Oh, but so do I. I mean, like, it's like that too is I think a function of my passion on the page.
I was gonna save this till later, but like the IBS of it all. I mean, really, did you write this book specifically for me? I was like, sex with an old dude, publishing, IBS, poverty. Is this my personal journal? I so appreciate that. And like, okay, so this is later in my questions, but whatever. I want to thank you I read your profile in the New York Times, which like, how incredible. I mean,
insane.
Dude, I
still don't know if I can fully wrap my head around that. Like it still feels extremely surreal. And I feel like there was a part of me that felt like very exposed by that, very exposed. But I feel like the response was so wonderful, and it was just cool to be able to kind of to talk about like the I guess my life, which is like the origin of there are parallels.
It was I read it and I was like, oh, this, like, yes, you deserve it, but also it's like incredible. So in it, you talk about writing about a Black woman who is messy and doesn't have it together and is figuring it out, and the way that looks isn't, you know, like we get those stories about like people figuring it out and it's kind of like a tidy path to figuring it out.
That's right.
Edie is a mess, and we don't get to see a lot of Black messes. And as a Black mess who writes about being a Black mess, I'm always looking, I'm like, there are others of us.
Right.
Where is all of our work? Where are the stories about us? And I just appreciate that so much. And I want you to talk about,
thank you,
about feeling the need to write a story about a messy Black woman.
So like, I mean, as like a fellow Black mess, you know, like I was also writing a story that I wanted to see and that I felt in my own life, you know, and like the IBS representation is part of that, you know, like I wanted to make room for a Black woman who is, you know, who's angry, you know, who makes mistakes. I think that when you're writing from, you know, like a marginalized background and you manage to carve out some room to tell your story, there's a temptation to make that story pristine, you know, to represent well. And I, you know, I didn't feel the humanity in that, you know. I feel like it felt more humane to tell a story that makes room for those contradictions, especially for, you know, a Black woman who I think, you know, like there are people in institutions that are, you know, really invested in policing our behavior and our feelings, and it felt freeing for me, and I hope, you know, for the character to write, you know, a depiction of a Black woman who is sort of on that messy trajectory and sort of up against, you know, both kind of structural and personal impediments, and it just felt like I just needed to write a story that felt relevant, I think, to my life personally, because I mean, I like, it's kind of tricky to talk about the book in a way that's autobiographical, but of course I drew from my own life and my own journey toward to writing, you know, or even painting. It was really, you know, it wasn't tidy. It was a lot of, there were steps I took forward and steps I took backward, and I wanted to speak to that.
I was gonna ask if you worry that people will conflate your story with Edie's story. And my main worry, not worry, but like, I'm wondering if you're worried that people are gonna be like, so tell me about that white couple you fucked.
Yeah, a little bit. There's definitely a part of me that is worried, definitely worried about that. But it would. There's a lot of me in the book. There is a lot of me in the book in terms of like what my obsessions are, what my preoccupations are. But I do think, you know, there's an element of like the Edie character that is, you know, I have the benefit of having written her with some hindsight. You know, like she is, I think, way more self-aware, way faster than I ever was at 23, at 24, at 25. You know, and so it is like, I feel like I have a good friend who says like the character in the book is your id, and you, the person, are the ego. And I think that is a great way to distinguish the two, because I feel very different from the like energy of what my writing is. And I'm, you know, I'm house cat, really, truly. But yeah, there's still so much of me in it, and like I couldn't have written this without some sort of firsthand experience.
Yeah. I mean, I write about myself, so it lends itself much more naturally to people talking to me as if they know me, and they do. But I think in a book like Lester, I was reading it, and then once I knew I was going to talk to you about it, I was like, oh man, everyone's going to talk to her like it's her, and that's going to feel so weird.
It does feel a little strange, but like I feel you know, the way I engage with fiction, with like anything I love or am interested in is really, really earnestly, like deeply, creepily. And so like I kind of, you know, that to me feels like the kind of, I don't know, that's how I relate to things I like, you know, to like kind of look deeply into them. Mm-hmm. And I kind of come from a place of fandom. And so I think when people approach me about the book and they want to know more and they want to know more about me, like that feels really cool. Like that just feels cool.
Yeah. Oh, good. Oh no, that's exciting. I thought you were gonna be, because
no.
You know, it's weird because like you write like when you write like a sexy thing and people like want to know, well, who are you having sex with and who is this about and who did you have sex with? It's always like, are you open to being like, no, it's not that person in my Instagram from 2 years ago. No, no, that old man is not the one I was writing about. And it's like, I'm glad to know that you are ready to handle that. I would be like, yeah, it's about him and here's his picture, here's his social security number.
But you know, like I feel
here's
like
the car we had sex in.
The reality that you're drawing from, at least I think with fiction, is never as interesting. So I feel like there's a part of me that does not want to puncture that for people. Yeah. So like otherwise, you know, like
be like, this story is actually boring, and if I told it to you at a party, you'd fall asleep. So this is a question that's interesting to maybe me only, but I was like reading the Times profile and I was like, oh, are you ready for all of your past people to come crawling out of the woodwork to talk to you with this new higher profile? And my secondary question to that is, I want you to talk about like the pressure of hype, like
sure.
when you, because I like, you know, my first book when it first came out was just like on a little indie press, no one knew who I was, and I kind of had to build an audience. And then when my books got big, it was like, you know, I could deal with it already.
Yeah.
But this is your first book and it's everywhere and people are really excited about it. And I wondered like what that feels like to you.
It is really, my head is spinning. Like I truly don't think that I will have any perspective or even be able to absorb this until like who knows when. Mm-hmm. Like I will say, like it definitely is. It actually has been kind of great hearing from people like from all different points of my life, and I feel like I kind of have, you know, the kind of version that they knew is different from the version that, you know, I am now. There are so many different, and that kind of brings up those old versions for me too. But it's kind of all around been very, you know, it's been wonderful the way it's kind of reconnected me with a lot of people who have been in my life and been with me during different points in this writing process. You know, people who like I knew in undergrad when, you know, like I could, like people who literally had to push me onto the stage for my like the poetry slam, you know, like that is really special, you know, to be able to share that. But I'd say the hype is it's really scary. There's a part of it that is actually really I mean, it's surprising, like especially within this moment. You know, there's a part of me that's like waiting for like the other shoe to drop. You know.
Yeah.
But
me too, always.
Yeah, okay, always. That's gonna be.
Oh, still.
But it is so. Yeah, it feels unreal. It really feels unreal. But it is really exciting. Yeah. It's really exciting and affirming.
Good.
You know,
I want you to be excited. I want this to be good for you.
Yeah.
Especially because I love the book so much. I'm glad it's been good for you.
Yeah.
Like that's important. Okay, I'm about to look at my list of questions. Okay, as a writer, I always want to know, and I mean this in like the least pretentious way possible, but what is your writing process? I'm always very curious, like, do you set time aside? Do you like write in your pajamas? Do you get like up and get dressed like it's a job? What's your process?
So, no, I don't do that thing where, you know, like I know they say that if you're like working from home, which I always do when I write, that you're supposed to kind of like put clothes on and be a real human. But like for me, I always work in bed, which is where I am now. And like, it's just where I am most comfortable. Like I would love to potentially go to a cafe and kind of work among people, but I always feel kind of like on guard. And so
I can't do that either, because I get worried that I'll have to take a shit and then people won't like guard my computer.
That's real. That's really, really real. And for me, it's more like every single time I do it in public because I have to, like, you know, when I was working a 9 to 5 and I would write like on, you know, the train home. It was just, I think, you know, you're reading on the train, you're writing on the train, there's always someone who's like looking over your shoulder. Like much of what I've written in terms of short stories, I think I've written under the eyes of someone sitting next to me on the train.
That's incredible. I can't like text on a moving vehicle, let alone like compose. And you write these beautiful, beautiful sentences, and so I'm like imagining you doing that on the train, and like clearly you're a genius, because I can't.
No, it's crazy. Sometimes it is like, I was once writing a story about, you know, that was strictly about how surveilled you feel as a woman moving around in the world. And I looked up and there was a man sort of just kind of watching me write that. But mostly I kind of—
Girl, that's right. You are surveilled.
But like, yeah, I stay inside. I don't wait for inspiration. I kind of just have to make a routine out of it. Though I will say, like, lately, I kind of just haven't been as tight with it as I normally am. But for me, it's really like, it has to be regular. I set maybe I'll write 5 sentences. Like, that's my goal. And for me, that's kind of—
Are you writing now? Like, are you writing now, like, amidst all of the, like, book?
No, I really, like, I'm not writing. I'm honestly mostly painting, and that is really weird. It's usually kind of opposite for me, where one comes easier to me than the other. But right now, like, it is, like, strictly painting. But, yeah, you know, I'm a slow writer. I work best at night, like really early morning hours. And I set a goal, like a small goal, which is usually a big goal for me, which is a few sentences. And that's more of a trick. So like once I'm in there, I'm going. And so like, yeah, it's just more, I try to make a routine out of it. Once I know, like I dread it, you know, I think we all kind of have those moments where we're like, oh, I'm not writing, I should be sitting down now. But once I'm sitting down and I'm in front of my computer, I feel like I'm in it. I'm really in it.
Man, I wish I had even like a teaspoon. It's admirable that you do that. Like, my process is wait until the day before it's due, panic until 3 a.m, and then start writing at 3 a.m, and then like cry the whole next day. So
that's right.
I admire. Like, I need to learn how to set a goal. I'm going to take notes after this. Okay, we have so many questions, and I'm worried that, like, their questions are better than mine. So I want to incorporate those, like, so we don't run out of time. Oh, please excuse me while I try to figure out the computer. Okay. Oh, this was on my list of questions. Well, not this part. McKenna says, what a great pairing of talented writers, which, thank you. I did not write that on my sheet. Who are you reading that you love? Who have you read that you feel your book is in conversation with?
Oh, okay. Reading that I love, How Much of These Hills is Gold, Pam Zhang's book is so good. Lakewood by Megan Giddings.
Oh yeah, I read that. It was great.
Amazing. His Ghost of Family by Maisie Card, Crooked Hallelujah by Kelly Jo Ford, Being Lolita by Allison Wood. Books that I feel are, Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, which is just incredible. I just feel like I'm always like so scared I'm gonna leave like all these really great books out.
Yeah.
Books in conversation with mine. I would say Britt Bennett's first book, The Mothers, was like it really just like hugely like I love that book
so much. It's so good.
Tessa Moshfegh, like Homesick for Another World, that collection. It's more like the energy of it. I felt my mind was opened by like the sort of brutality of her prose. I love Sally Rooney. I think her books are really, really smart and sexy. Holly Butler's The New Me, Candace Carty-Williams, Queenie.
Loved Queenie.
Yes. I think those are books that I look to. Though there are books that I feel like are like in conversation with, and then there are books that I literally just like on a prose level, like I just need fuel. So I kind of just go to old ones and kind of keep looking at what are they doing. Do you feel inspired by other people's writing? Because I often feel intimidated. If I read something really good, then it usually takes me a little bit to start writing after that, because I'm like, oh man, what I do, garbage. But do you get inspiration from reading like other really good books? 100%, but like the I am garbage feeling is actually the inspiration for me. You know, like it's like I read a book and I feel that insane jealousy that's just like, okay, how do I mean, like we are the writers we are, we cannot be, you know, other writers, but like there's still a part of me that's just like, how do I do that? You know, that's sort of what moves me to, you know, sometimes that moves me to create a new project, just the energy, like the kind of the care. Mostly it's the sentence level, like that really intricate writing that is very abundant and rich. When it comes to language, it really moves me, and I do feel that, like that intimidation. Like I feel like those are the books that I love, are the ones that really intimidate me.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Okay. Erin wants to know, both of you lean into some uncomfortable vulnerabilities in your writing. Do you feel like by writing them, putting them out into the world, you end up shielding yourself from them in any way, or do you just feel laid bare?
I would say that like there is an element of writing about the body, about like the sort of the like juices is like such a disgusting yucky word, right? But like the inner workings of the body, like the underbelly of it, and is really liberating. I do feel both freed and of the stigma, if it exists, around, you know, how we kind of curate, how we talk about it. But yes, I also do feel laid bare, though I will say, and I was recently talking to a writer who phrased it, I won't be able to phrase it like she did, but the idea that when you're writing a book, at least it's the case for me, how you write it it's under almost the assumption that no one will see it, you know, like, yeah. You know, and now people see it, but you kind of have to feel that like ability to kind of go in those private, secret places.
Yeah, I don't ever think about an audience when I'm writing, because I wouldn't write anything, right? You know, because I always think of like this, who is the scariest person that could read this, right? And then I just am like panic stricken and can't write. But I will say that once the writing is done and I turn it in, and it's like in my editor's hands, so it's getting published, you know, probably whether I like it or not, I feel like at the very least it's kind of a shield, like to that at least like once when I'm walking into a situation, people know what they're dealing with. Yes. And that is a very freeing feeling. I don't know that I would recommend it as a person like walking into a room being like, listen, I'm stressed. I'm on 20 milligrams of Lexapro every day. Also, I'm extremely anxious. Also, I'm gonna have diarrhea 6 times tonight. Don't worry about it if I just can't. Like you know, like socially you can't be like that. But if I'm hanging out with someone who I don't like really know, but I know they've read my stuff, then at least
yes.
I know that they know kind of what's going on, and that like frees me from having to tell them. That's the hardest thing, I think, is to look someone in the face and say, listen, these are all of my failings. But if I know that you've read them, then like the work is done. So I feel that. Okay, the cover is gorgeous. The New York Times mentioned, this is from Anonymous. The New York Times mentioned that you're also a visual artist. How do you relate to the cover representing your story? Oh, yeah.
So, Na Kim is the designer, and she like killed it. It was the very first cover they showed me, which is, I think, what I've heard, rare. And for me, I knew what I wanted with the cover was color. I mean, because when I paint, that's sort of the dominate, like that is sort of the dominant factor and like what I do and where I feel comfortable. Like less technical prowess, more like spewing color onto the canvas. And I mean, this is technically beautiful, you know. But I saw that, and it's lustrous for one, and it just has such a really beautiful kind of wildness in its color. Like it's all over the spectrum. And you have, I don't know if you can see it because the cover has sort of foil, but there is on the cover, you know, like textured hair too, you know, and that was really important to me. But yeah, it just is it's so beautiful and delicious. So for me, it was just that explosion of color, that luster, you know, that is literally, you can see there, and that, you know, a kind of woman out of you see her hair.
It's so beautiful, and it's so nice when the cover matches the inside. Like yes. Seeing the cover, like I don't have a hard copy, or I do have like an ARC, but I don't have my hard copy yet, so I'm very excited to like touch it and feel it. And it's so nice like when the outside matches like the beauty yes. of the inside, if I can be a little corny. Okay. What do you think are the hardest things about transitioning from poetry to novel writing?
That's a bit of a hard question, because I feel like I feel almost uncomfortable calling myself a poet, you know, because I feel like the poets who are out there and really doing it, they're really truly supreme. But I think with like transitioning from poetry to novel length work, it's more that in the novel I have more room to splay, you know, I have more room to kind of to delve into my obsessions and my preoccupations. I just have more page space, but at the same time there's a real discipline, a form of language, a real investment in language that exists with poetry, like the best poetry, you know, that I still try to incorporate in my longer work. And I think too that, you know, the best poetry it's oriented around like the element of surprise with language. And I think comedy is too. And I think, you know, when language is working on the page, that's what's happening, is it's an element of surprise. And so I would say the transition was, you know, I took a lot of the things that I loved about poetry and I just tried to incorporate them into a longer form.
Mm-hmm. I think it worked.
Thank you.
Please tell us how you write about, wait, let me give the I skipped one. See, I knew I was gonna fuck this up. Okay, no, M says, please tell us how you write about sensuality, desire, and sex, especially longing and obsession.
Sure. I mean, and that it was important to me that I started a project where that was sort of animating me right off the bat, where it was obsession and infatuation. And I could show a young Black woman yearning openly and kind of making the mistakes that you make when you are leading with that and so like the earnestness on the page was important to me, and it was important to me in sex. And I think the most earnest way to replicate that on the page is to incorporate the parts that are awkward and silly and ugly. And you know, for me, and I guess I've mentioned this I think before, but you know, the things that I like to watch, things I like to read are things that make me feel a little bit like a voyeur. You know, I like to feel that I'm watching something that has not been studied, you know, that is not being curated for, you know, to be seen. And in writing sex, it was important to me to write those like private kind of tricky negotiations that we make around the body, and to write them kind of bluntly, and yeah, I guess honestly, candidly. I didn't want to, I think, as they say, like pan away to the drapes. You know, I wanted to show all of it.
Can I say that as a reader, I really appreciate an awkward depiction of sex. It like messes with your brain a little, I think, when you, boy, I just spit everywhere. Hopefully you listen to that. Obviously, I'm getting excited. As a reader, yeah, I fucked up everything I was gonna say. I'm too sexed up. Okay, but I appreciate, I think it's like, it's so like weird when you read about sex that's like smooth and easy, especially for me, because I don't think I've ever had smooth and easy sex in my life, even when it's good. It's always like an elbow in the rib, or you say something weird. There's a little of that happening in Lester, where you like say something fucked up, or like you don't communicate well at first, and like it's such a relief to read that and to read, oh, okay, not only are like people having awkward experiences all the time, but here it is beautifully written in this book. It has to be, I'm not the only one, thank God. So, okay, Jalen wants to know, Akila is such an amazing character. Can you discuss writing her and her relationship with Edie?
Thank you. Akila, you know, when I was writing her, I kind of wanted to talk about relieving that isolation. You know, she like Edie, is an isolated person who's sort of navigating these white spaces, places where she cannot be like adequately witnessed, despite the efforts of her family. Like, it was important for me to write that generously and not like guide my reader to a kind of like specific moral conclusion on that, you know. But with Akila, I wanted to write a young Black woman who has like a rich interior world, and who in fact, you know, when she comes into contact with Edie, they have a kind of cobble together a sisterhood. You know, I think that's sort of what they are both seeking, among, you know, many things. So I wanted to, because you see Edie, you know, those motions to make connection are deferred, you know, sometimes due to her, you know, sort of failings, and sometimes due to the failings of others. But it was important for me between these two Black women, to have real camaraderie, but also camaraderie that is complicated, you know, that is not just it's easy, because I think I wanted them to be both distinct people who have different ways of kind of reconciling that isolation and finding their place, and also like I wanted to write about a young Black nerd, you know, like, because I think that was I drew a lot from my life there too, and you know, it was really, really fun to be able to write about fandom and Comic-Con.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Okay, to both Sam and Raven, what is your advice to beginning writers who are just starting out, gaining confidence, and looking for guidance? How do you keep your material so authentic in both feeling and language?
So I mean, I just try to write honestly. I think there was a point in my like journey where I was so obsessed with the sort of the cosmetic trappings, the like the originality of the thing, where the things I ended up saying and writing had no meaning. You know, like I had really great teachers and mentors who would ask me those sort of blunt, hard questions, like, honestly, what do you mean by this? And there were moments where I couldn't explain what I meant, what I'd written. And so there was a certain point at which I became, like, I oriented to write in a way that was communicative and direct. You know, I think there's a temptation to want to hide on the page, especially behind language. I still probably do that a lot. And so, like, the way that I find towards honesty is to literally try and say what I mean as directly as I can.
My advice, I mean, as far as authenticity is concerned, I will say that you don't owe authenticity to anyone. So if you don't feel like putting it all out there, you shouldn't feel pressured to. And as for, but how do I do it? I think for me, I just kind of, anything I've processed, I've said this before, so hopefully no one who's watching this has already heard it, but I always say that I will talk about anything, and all of the things I talk about, I wouldn't be afraid to like see on the news. So if you're writing about something personal, and that's probably the best barometer for whether or not you should write about it and put it out there, is could you stand to have people repeating it back to you all the time, or to see it on a billboard? Because that's essentially what you do when you put a thing out into the world, is you're going to get a million people talking to you about it all the time. So don't write about anything you're not ready to talk about, but be as honest as you can in the things that you are. And like practical advice, I would say to write every day. And also, this is like gonna be unpopular. You gotta be prepared to like write for free. And I don't mean like write for organizations for free, but like if you put pressure on your work for it to make you money, I feel like especially in the beginning, you're gonna always like feel disappointed. Like I still have a blog. I'm 40 years old. I just started making money on my work, but I've been like writing on the internet for free for 12 years. So don't put pressure on yourself to make money, and also write all the time and give it away. Okay, that's bad advice, but what can you do? Okay. Luster could be classified as a New York book. How is your writing connected to a sense of place and geography?
So, I mean, it definitely, like, I love this city so much, and I think that bled into the book. And there is like, there's a kind of scene and a kind of writing that I like to do that I think is like New York almost facilitates, a writing that involves sort of pressure and speed and like chaos. And I think, yeah, there, you know, it is, you know, at least in the first part, really central to the book. Though I did, you know, it also is like takes place kind of mostly in Jersey, and it was, for me, it was really kind of fun lifting her out of that, well, one kind of chaos, and then sort of delving into the new problems of a suburb, which typically you find a character in a suburb, like the primary problem is a sort of, you know, suburban malaise, boredom. But for Edie, you know, it's a place where her body is imperiled just in a different way. You know, she's constantly being surveilled as Sakila. So each setting came with its own challenges.
Okay. Molly wants to know, I love the book. I'm sorry, I messed. Molly says, I love the book and I love how queerness is latent in Edie and Rebecca's relationship. Did you ever have a draft where that desire was more literally realized? Why keep it in the subtext?
I didn't have a draft where it was more realized, but I mean, it is, the sex is there, and I think is inherent in really even platonic relationships between women. It's a kind of immediacy and romance and intensity. You know, like, I think, you know, I've been in and know many women who are, you know, who've had those relationships that start urgently, right away, without preamble. And those are the relationships that interest me and that I wanted to speak to. You know, the relationships between women that are kind of allow room for darkness, you know, allow room for you to like kind of let all that ooze out. And I think that between them is a bit of a conspiracy, and their, you know, their coming together is kind of constantly complicated by the fact that they have real fundamental differences that they need to reconcile. So I think that, you know, they come together and they kind of take a few steps apart, and that kind of, it almost solves the problem of what happens when you actually finally let two people have sex, which is like, then what, you know? So it was nice to kind of prolong that.
Every single one of my sexual experiences, then what? I think this is gonna be our last question because we're coming up on 8:30. Can you both share any info on what you are currently working on?
Well, I actually am pretty taken up with sort of the launch of the book, so I haven't really been able to work on much lately, but I have a handful of books still in me that I'm really excited to kind of tackle once I have a moment.
Yeah. You putting out a book, like, and your first book, you're going to be doing this for a while. Like, now it's your job to sell this book. You're going to be doing this for a while. I'm not writing shit for myself. I have my newsletter, but I'm not. People are like, are you working on another book? And I'm like, man, please buy those old ones. Eventually, I'm going to do that. I'm working on some TV shows. I'm working on Tuca and Birdie and Work in Progress on Showtime. So I have some TV jobs. But like eventually, I mean, the beauty of what I do is that as long as I don't die, I'll still have something to write about. And on that note, Raven, your book is incredible. I want everyone to buy it. Buy it from Greenlight. They're amazing. The book, I didn't say this enough and now we're running out of time. It's so funny. I have a list. I was gonna like quote your own words back to you, but that's like embarrassing. But like, when Edie is at the party and she talks about the music, like how like somebody puts on a playlist and like that person like thinks they discovered Portishead. There are so many lines. The brown paper bag line, it's so funny and it's sexy and it makes me want to go fucking old man. So watch your bags. I'm coming for them. Yeah.
That was my goal.
Anything else you want to say? Like, tell them about your tour dates or whatever. What else do you want to say?
So tomorrow, I am doing a Instagram live event with Bellatrist, and I also have a event with Britt Bennett tomorrow at I think Harvard Bookstore. And I have the rest of my tour dates posted up on my website and also on Twitter. So yeah, there's a lot to come.
Good. Okay. Buy the book, everyone. Is someone gonna come? Oh, there we go.
Thank you so much, Raven and Samantha, for tonight's wonderful conversation. And thank you again to everyone who came out and shared this space with us tonight and provided these wonderful questions. I wish we could have gotten through all of them. A reminder that The event has been recorded. If you missed any part of it, had friends or family who missed it, who absolutely need to hear this conversation or read this book, the event will be posted on YouTube in the next few days. Our channel is Greenlight Bookstore. And you can also buy Raven's book at greenlightbookstore.com, or you can hop into the Fort Greene or Prospect Leopard's Garden location. We're currently opening for limited browsing, but if you'd like a signed copy, when you order online, just request that in order comments. Thanks again, everyone, so much for coming out tonight. And congratulations on your launch, Raven, and the book coming out tomorrow. And have a great rest of your tour. And have a great evening, everybody.
Bye.